All right, we're back for another Auburn live football show. I am Justin Hokanson, Cole Pinkston joining me as always. Cole, what's up, dude?
What is up, man?
Everything. Hey, before we get going, quick shout out to our main sponsor, Session Cocktail in downtown Auburn. They're located right there on Magnolia Avenue, right next to Taco Mama. Go check them out. Session Cocktail, awesome atmosphere. They have bar seating and booth seating. They have some couches. There's no stand-up seating. It's not a traditional college bar like that. It's an awesome cocktail lounge. They make great drinks. So go check them out. Hunter Joe and Avery and all the good people. They make a great old fashioned. They have happy hours 4 to 6. They do cocktail for a cause every month. So go check that out and see what the special cocktail is. And it supports a charity every month. That changes every month. So go check them out. Session Cocktail in downtown Auburn. All right, Cole, let's talk about kickers. No, I'm sorry. Let's talk about quarterbacks. Big news. Peyton Thorne is named the starter. Not to anybody's surprise, but it's official. Gut reaction, first reaction, Peyton Thorne officially named the starting quarterback for Auburn heading into UMass.
I think on our last show, we talked about the timing of when they make the call on who it is. No matter who it is, it's just the timing I think is important. And Hugh Freeze pointed that out today in the press conference too. He's like, look, it's time to make a call on this. It's time to put somebody with the ones and leave them there. It's time to get that going. And I think the longer it dragged on, I just don't see that as a benefit personally. I think it needed to be said and done for the most part. Obviously, it's still a competition, but somebody needed to be the first team guy, and I'm glad he went ahead and did it. Right now, could have been sooner too. Either way, I think it's fine. So I'm glad that they went ahead and did it. I think it's good for the offense moving forward, and of course, I've been saying my pick's been Peyton Thorne since he was announced to transfer from Michigan State. So there it is.
Yeah, I think everybody thought Thorne would be the guy. I think it was just a matter of when. We heard a little bit about Robbie Ashford improving. We heard a little bit about Holden Gardner improving. And so you wondered what that gap looked like. But Thorne was never not the guy. And Hugh Freeze confirmed that on Thursday, saying Thorne was the guy. What he saw on Saturday and why he went ahead and wanted to make this decision was he said on Thursday, I thought it was interesting. He said he thought Payton Thorne pressed a little bit in Saturday's scrimmage, just tried to make too many plays. That's what resulted in Freeze on Saturday saying, I thought I had a pretty good idea. I thought my mind was made up, but now I need to rethink some things because Payton Thorne pressed a little bit and Robbie played well Saturday, which is what I said Saturday. I came back on the board and I said, hey, Robbie's the guy pushing Payton Thorne, not Holden Gardner right now. But he was just disappointed that Payton Thorne pressed a little bit on Saturday. And so part of making the decision now is he wanted to relieve Payton Thorne of that pressure. Like you're the guy, stop pressing, go back to doing what you were doing in the first few days of fall camp, first week of fall camp. And so naming Payton Thorne the starter was I think important. A couple of things stand out to me. One, the amount of times Hugh Freeze and Philip Montgomery talk about his understanding of the offense, his quick decision making, and his leadership abilities. That's talked about more than anything about his skill set. I think when you hear them talk about understanding, I think Philip Montgomery said it the other day, and it caught my eye. He said the rate of him understanding is impressive, basically, and that was a quote that stood out. Him talking about the rate of him picking things up is nice. They're happy with it. So I think his dedication to the film room, being a coach's son, like all of those things are make Payton Thorne a really good football player, and they make him the best choice because he's going to be he's the most reliable choice and the understanding. He's played a lot of football, and from watching him out there, he throws a good ball, and he's got enough mobility to make things happen in the RPO game. So I think all of that, he's got the best combination of skill set, leadership, understanding, quick decision making, experience. He's got the best combination of that. Gardner might throw the best ball for whatever that's worth. Robbie's the best athlete, but the best combination of everything it takes is Payton Thorne far and away. I think the other interesting thing is he's the starter going into UMass. But as I heard and Freeze kind of talked about it, That's all. He's the starter for UMass. Now, I think we would assume he's in a great spot to be the starter all year. It's not. I don't think the gap between Thorne and Ashford or Gurner is so close that, like, if Thorne, I don't think there's a short leash, but I think Freeze is just playing it the right way and saying he's the starter for the opener, and we're going to continue to evaluate the quarterback position. I fully expect Payton Thorne to play fairly well, to be the starter for UMass and Cal and Sanford and into SEC play. I don't think you would get into like a decision on, is Payton Thorne the right guy? I don't think that question would come up probably until conference play, because I don't think those first three opponents are going to push Auburn or Payton Thorne to the point where he plays really, really poorly. Like, he might not be amazing, but I don't think he'll play poorly. You get into A&M, Georgia, like then we'll see what it's all about. But for now, Payton's the starter. The other thing that stood out is Freeze talking about Robbie Ashford and said he'll always have a package. But Freeze said multiple times on Thursday, if he handles the decision right, if the guys, he mentioned the guys as a whole, if everybody handles it right, but he mentioned Robbie specifically a couple of times, saying he's always going to have a role with us. He adds value to us, to our football team, if he handles this decision right. And I thought that was just an interesting comment. I wanted to ask him, but I didn't really want to dig on that. But I think a fair question would have been, when you say that, if he handles it right, are you concerned about him handling it right? Is there concern on your end on whether or not he will handle this decision right? Otherwise, why would you say if? Is there some doubt that maybe he won't? And so I think that's the big question with Robbie. And you saw on Thursday at some practice, Holden Gurner was taking reps with the twos during 11-on-11 work, which we got to witness a good bit of that. When they went 11-on-11 and they're thudding up, but they're running their stuff, Gurner was the second quarterback out. Ashford was the third quarterback out. And you put those two things together, and it certainly, you have to ask the question, did Robbie handle this right? Did he handle the last couple of days well, or did he not handle it well? And that's why you see Gurner with the twos. I think that's a fair question to ask.
Yeah, I thought the exact same thing, Justin, when he said if. I mean, he could have just said, Robbie Ashford is going to be great for us in this role, and left it at that. But he didn't. He threw the if in there. If he handles this right and he keeps working and does all that. And he pointed that out a bunch of times, not just about Robbie, but about both of them. Hey, I hope that they get, and I think he was a little bit disappointed about the news getting out a little bit early, but maybe that's because he wanted them to find out a different way, because he's worried about this kind of thing, right? About how they might.
Well, they found out. Now they found out that quarterbacks knew before we reported. The quarterbacks knew. I think before everything got out, the quarterbacks knew from Hugh Freeze in his face, you're not going to be the guy. Peyton's going to be the guy.
Yeah. And they might have had an inkling all along anyway when he was brought in for Michigan State after throwing for 6,000 yards over there. Kind of unfortunate for Robbie and some of the things. The reason I go back and grade these games is because I want to go back and say maybe he was not put in the right position right here. I want to add context to the numbers, because I just hate when we just throw out numbers and there's no context. I don't operate that way. So I got to know, was he in the good position here? Was he in a bad position? Was he thrown, was he left out to dry? How much did that happen? And I think he was a good bit, but I think a lot of it was just mistakes of his own. And then you go back to Peyton Thorne's film, and he makes mistakes here and there. He'll throw a pick, he'll do something like that. He'll hold the ball too long, but he looks like a polished quarterback on film, and there's plenty of film to support that. So before anybody took a snap, Payton Thorne had an edge, and he ran with it, and he's done well with it. And now we know, that's been the case the whole time.
Yeah. Real quick, as we keep this quarterback discussion going, quick shout out to another sponsor, gametime.co. Gametime.co, awesome site for tickets and events and comedy shows and music and all that good stuff. Gametime.co. use the code War Eagle. You get 20% off your first purchase. And if you buy tickets through GameTime.co, if you find tickets somewhere else in the same section, same row, they'll give you back 110% of the difference there. So you have a little bit of a buffer there if you find tickets that are cheaper than GameTime.co. So go check them out for last minute ticket deals for all your sporting events and music and concerts and all that cool stuff. GameTime.co. Go check them out. War Eagle 20% off. Yeah, Cole, I think the context is important. I mean, Payton Thorne threw 24 picks at Michigan State. That's a lot. It was a 2-to-1 ratio. That's, you want to be better than that. But man, you can't really judge. It's a completely different offense than Michigan State. Like what he did at Michigan State and what he's doing here are going to be two different things. The good thing that I don't think people realize is this is what Payton Thorne did in high school, is RPO. He grew up with RPO, and this is what he did in high school when he accounted for 100-something touchdowns and just put up crazy numbers in high school. His high school numbers were phenomenal. And so this is what he did there. It's not like he's never run this system before. So I think it's going back a little bit to his roots a little bit. So I mean, Payton Thorne's the guy. He's going to get the majority of the reps moving forward. If they weren't going to name anybody, if this wouldn't have happened on Thursday, I was going to ask you, Freeze, the question: how do you balance wanting there to be competition with needing the number one guy to get the reps immediately? You want to keep the fire going, but you also want to say, but I need a guy to go get all like most of the reps with the ones in practice because I need to be preparing him. When do I, because as soon as you do that, right, the competition, it's not over, but you say you're 1, you're 2, you're 3, and you risk a little bit of, let down from somebody or whatever it might be. And so I thought it was probably good timing to go ahead and do it. They scrimmage one more time on Saturday. That'll be the last scrimmage of fall camp, and then classes start, and then the in-season schedule gets going. I guess, I mean, to me, one of the questions now around Robbie is, what is his role? Hugh Freeze says he's got a package, he's got a role for us, and I think that's true. I think Auburn absolutely has a plan for him, and they think he can help them win football games. What do you think it is? Is it short yardage? Is it red zone? Is it kind of the things we think, or is it anytime? Who knows? I mean, they could be they're on their own 30 and 1st and 10, and there goes Robbie in there to run a play. But could it be scattered, or do you think it's specific places on the field and specific roles? Like, what exactly do you think his role is?
Well, I would I tell you what, I have been burned by the role or the package deal. I've been burned by that. I don't like it. I'm not a fan of that. I think you need one quarterback and one quarterback only. I don't know. Hey, all right.
Zac, you interrupted Cole. Cole had a great thought going, and he just completely lost his train of thought.
It wasn't that great.
I love you, Cole. Sorry, bud.
It wasn't that great, Zach. You didn't ruin anything. I was just talking about how I do not like the 2-quarterback system or the package deal, even though Hugh Freeze pointed it out today that could be a thing with Robbie Ashford. I would like to think that he doesn't do it randomly like we've seen before. It would have to be like a short yardage or goal line package, in my opinion, Justin, to answer your question.
Yeah, I think that's kind of my question. Is it random or not? Yeah.
I hope not. It seemed random when we saw this last year, right? The whole Finley and Ashford thing. Like, TJ would have arguably like the best throw of the season, like a 2nd and 26 or something like that. And then he gets pulled. It's like, that doesn't really seem to make any sense. So I love the idea of, Robbie in a package in the goal line. I love that. I love it in 3rd and 1 situations, but also, what kind of message does that send? Because you name this guy your leader, and those are the most important downs of the game, 3rd and short and all of that. Like, what kind of message does that send? I don't know. It's a tricky situation.
Zac Blackerby, by the way, welcome from Locked on Auburn. Shout out Locked on Auburn.
Guys.
Zac Blackerby, hopping on.
AuburnLive.com. Auburn on 3 forever.
Yes,
Oh,
sir.
yeah. As the ESPN cited us today, Auburn live on 3.com. I was like, not it, guys. That's just how.
But close.
Can you not?
But close.
How hard is it? It's 2023. We can't just click. You can't see the URL. We're just guessing. Anyway,
Yeah.
I was like, Chris Lowe. I was like, yeah, it's close, but not right, guys.
Props to you for breaking everything, by the way.
Well, I mean, I don't know if I broke it, but I reported it. That's what I did.
You put it up. It's like, all right, I guess we can post this stuff now.
I mean, I reported it. I thought I did my job. Yeah. So Zach, we were talking about, I think Peyton, I don't think anybody's surprised by the Peyton news. Just kind of, we were curious maybe what the gap was between Holden, Robbie, and Peyton. And Hugh Freeze went ahead and made the decision to name him a starter, didn't want him to press and things like that, wanted him to try to settle in, and thought he pressed a little bit too much last week. And I would assume you're kind of with us. You're not surprised by the news that Peyton Thorne's the starter, right?
No, not surprised by the news. Am surprised at the timing. I thought it would come early next week after the scrimmage. But that's clearly not what happened. I do wonder if that was his intentions. I do wonder if this got out a little bit more than he expected it to. And then once the reports came out, there's only so much he could do. I don't know. It's impossible to know. But the only thing that surprises me is the timing. I thought this would come next week.
Yeah, that's fair. He was pretty perturbed. He was pretty bothered when we started the press conference. First question was, "Hey, there's reports about Peyton Thorne. Is that the case?" And he's like, "Well," he's like, "You guys know more than me, apparently." He said, "I don't know. Only like 4 people knew, but interesting how that works." But so yeah, clearly he didn't want. I think he told them. My guess is, listening to how he talked about Peyton Thorne pressing, I sort of think he wanted to tell him to relieve the pressure on Peyton a little bit, like go be the guy now. But he wasn't going to announce it maybe till after the scrimmage on Saturday, because we weren't originally going to talk to Hugh Freeze on Saturday. That got changed Thursday morning before we reported anything, I think. And so I kind of wonder if maybe he was going to do it after the scrimmage Saturday, because we're not going to see him again for a few days after that classes start. I don't know when we'll talk to him again. So I kind of think he was going to do scrimmage and then go out there after the scrimmage and say, 2 scrimmages in, 2 weeks practice, blah, blah, blah. I think I've seen enough. I think Peyton Thorne's done a good job, and he's going to be our guy. But either way, it's out now. Sorry. But yeah, I mean, I don't know what the intrigue is. I think Robbie, now it's like there's more intrigue about Robbie and what his role is than Peyton. The only intrigue about Peyton, I guess, is what kind of leash he's on. We don't think he's on any kind of short leash, even though Hugh Freeze said, "I'm going to continue to evaluate these guys." And, he's just a starter. I can't guarantee he's the starter for all 12 games. But I think barring injury or Peyton Thorne going out there and just looking horribly, which I don't anticipate, I feel like Peyton Thorne's in pretty good spot to be the starter for all 12 games.
Do you guys think he's the 1 and then Robbie's the 2 and Holden's the 3? Hoke, I saw your note in the corner message board about like the pecking order, or is like Robbie, and then Peyton's the starter and Holden's the backup? What do y'all think that looks like?
Well, is it possible that the competition is now between Robbie and Holden for that second spot? I mean,
maybe.
I don't know if there's maybe a clear-cut number 2 and a clear-cut number 3 yet. I would think it would be Robbie Ashford, just because, what he's capable of, and, he could be – I mean, I call him boom or bust. I think he's capable of huge plays, and then he has his moments when he struggles. So that's something that Hugh Freeze is obviously intrigued by, is his ability to get those massive, explosive plays. So I think he's going to be number 2, personally.
Robbie, yeah, I think it's Peyton, Robbie, Holden, which is, and I don't know about everybody else. It's what we've been saying since the start of fall camp. You listen to how Hugh talks about Gurner specifically today, and he says, great passer of the football, which, it only goes so far. Like he has a great release, but he immediately follows that up by saying, still trying to absorb. misses, make some mistakes, make some wrong reads, talks about him being young, kind of says the things to me that are a soft way of saying he's not there yet. Like, he's getting there. He's still absorbing that kind of stuff, but got a bright future. So he said, but he has a bright future. And so, and then you listen to how he talks about Robbie. He's got a package. He adds value. He's maybe the most freakish athlete I've ever had at quarterback. Those kind of things. I think it's now, Holden took number 2 reps during 11-on-11 work today on Thursday. We're recording this. He was the second quarterback out there during 11-on-11. Now, does that mean he's the number 2 quarterback? Or does that mean potentially that Robbie didn't take the news well that Peyton's the starter? Because the other thing Freeze talked about was Robbie's got value if he handles things well. And Robbie can do well if he handles this well. I mean, Hugh said that multiple times.
What do y'all think that means? I mean, he said it twice. What does that mean?
I think you go back to what Hugh Freeze said in the spring, where he was very transparent. I've challenged Robbie Ashford to be a better leader. I've challenged Robbie Ashford to do these things from a leadership standpoint, to be a better team. I've challenged him. Like, he openly talked about challenging Robbie Ashford. And I think this stuff is related. I think Robbie's a spirited and emotional guy that can go both ways. And when you have this kind of news, it could go both ways if you're Robbie. And I think that's what Hugh's alluding to. Like, if he handles it the right way, if he doesn't pout, if he doesn't think he got robbed from the job, if whatever you might think if you lose the job, I think that's what he's talking about. Now, how did Robbie handle it internally? I'm not exactly sure. But when you watch Holden go out there with the number 2 guys, or with the number 2 quarterback on Thursday, the day that the quarterback decision's announced and all this stuff, it certainly makes you wonder, did Robbie handle this well? And why is Holden the second guy out there and not Robbie?
Yeah, that's the thing. It's I said this before you jumped on, Zach. He could have just said, Robbie's got a package with us and he's going to be great for us. But he didn't. He had to throw in the if, and I thought that was interesting. Right when I heard it, it kind of triggered my ear, and I was like, okay, so if he handles it well, that's interesting. I mean, I don't know necessarily what it means. I think it just means something. I think it obviously means something.
Guys, I think it means he wasn't talking to us. I think he was talking to Robbie when he said it. I think that's what it means.
I think Robbie and Holden. I think both of them. I think he wants both of them to be, to act like nothing happened today and go in there and still act like you're trying to take that number 1 job. And that is, boy, is it hard to do with guys these days, because of course the easy thing to do is go hit the portal and go find a place where you can be the starter. And he pointed that out too. Is like, I think somebody even asked the question, do you think any of those guys are going to go to the portal? I'm not sure how he would know that right now, but that's the easy thing these days. And he's challenging them not to take the easy road and to keep working, and it'll pay off for you.
Yeah. It's tougher for Robbie to leave, obviously, because he already transferred. And some people said he graduates in the spring. Some people says he graduates next summer. So I don't know on that. Holden, of course, could leave in December very easily, but I hope he doesn't. I think he could be a really good quarterback here eventually. But the thing I think is most refreshing about this, just from an Auburn standpoint, is, Hoke, just a second ago, you mentioned like too high or too low with Robbie. Well, that's kind of been a theme for Auburn quarterbacks for the last half decade. I mean, it seems like that was a thing last year. It seems like that was kind of one of the bigger things, of the Bo Nix critics we constantly bring up. And I think with what we've heard out of Peyton throughout fall camp, in fact, it was after the 3rd practice, I was talking to somebody and I'm like, okay, give me an update on the quarterback situation. They said the thing that stood out to them most about Peyton was his demeanor never changes, right? When he would do something good, he'd go back to the huddle and observe, why did that work? And then when he would mess up, he'd go back to the huddle and observe, why did that not work? And I think that's really what kind of won over a lot of the locker room based on talking to different folks. And that's something we haven't seen in a starting quarterback since, I guess, Stidham. Y'all correct me if I'm wrong on that,
Stidham.
but it's been a minute. It's been arguably too long.
Well, I'll say, like, I was fortunate enough to host one of the On to Victory podcasts, but I was fortunate enough to host the one with Peyton Thorne. and we had him on as a guest. And so that's the first time I had spoken with him at length. And I came away thoroughly impressed with his demeanor, his approach, how he was answering questions, his mindset. I mean, you could just tell. You're like, the guy's got his head on straight, period. And so, yeah, it's not surprising at all that the team looks at him as a calming kind of an anchor of some sort, in terms of an emotional anchor. Like, you're going to stay the same. But yeah, you talk to him, man. Doesn't take long to understand that dude has got the it factor when it comes to intangibles. We've heard Montgomery say it. We've heard Freeze say it. And look, go all the way back to the spring, some early comments from Hugh Freeze about the quarterback position. And one of the things he talked about almost immediately, and almost more than any talent, is leadership. He has said it from the get-go. I want a guy that the team can rally around. I want a guy that's going to do all the right things off the football field. I mean, he's probably talked about that more than I want a guy who can throw the fade route or hit a slant route. Like, he's talking about leadership. And that's why he challenged Robbie. And I think that's why Peyton Thorne is so attractive. It makes a lot of sense as Auburn's starting quarterback to be that sort of calming effect. And yeah, he kind of makes Robbie's already a roller coaster. You put Peyton Thorne next to him, and it's glaring. It's glaring.
Yeah.
The difference.
Yeah. I asked Hugh Freeze what that meant, because he said that like 4 or 5 times, wanting more. And I asked specifically, what does that mean, coach? This was down in Mobile at the Senior Bowl. I pulled him to the side for an interview, and he said he needs the guys to grow up, is exactly what he said. And then Peyton Thorne comes in, and I had Peyton on my show. I mean, it's very clear that he controls a room when he walks into it. And he's talking about how it was really important to him to have a picture and name of everybody that works in the facilities. And he didn't want to walk past somebody in the hall and not know their name. And I mean, you just talk about like being a grown-up and being a leader. I mean, that's exactly what you want. That's a CEO that's come in to run a company, and he wants to, feel approachable by everyone. That's what a quarterback is, right? I mean, obviously it's different at the NFL level and the college level, but I mean, if you're coming in, this is essentially what free agency is. You go out and get this quarterback to lead your program for 1 or 2 years. He's the CEO of your football team, essentially. I mean, he's going to be the one, now that he's been named the starter, that's going to be running things when it matters most, in between the hashes, and running your offense, and hopefully winning football games. But that's the kind of guy that people want to play for and people want to root for internally. And I think that's what everybody kind of needed in this whole realignment of Auburn football, that we've kind of seen a glimpse of, wow, everybody's on the same page. I think Peyton Thorne's the perfect example of leading that.
Well, I think when you have a stable of quarterbacks, 3 or 4 quarterbacks, and each guy has a different demeanor, I think that's a problem. Now, you're going to have different skill sets in quarterback rooms. That's totally fine. Robbie Ashford, your running guy. Holden Geriner, they say, has one of the best, arms. The point is, if you go back and you look at Hugh Freeze quarterbacks, they all have the same demeanor. They always do. Bo Wallace, Chad Kelly, they're in control. They're never freaking out about anything. Go back to Liberty last year. He talked about that today. He had 3 to 4 different quarterbacks he had to play. They all looked the same in the game. They all looked like they knew what was going on. They all looked like they were calm. None of them had those problems where they freak out and they're evading the pocket too early and stuff like that. To me, that's a sign of great quarterback coaching, when every single guy you have somehow talked them into, and you have taught them to be the same, no matter what the situation is, as far as demeanor goes. So I think Peyton Thorne resembles that demeanor, and that I've thought that from the beginning, because there's plenty of film out there that supports what he can do, what he is, what he's not good at, and his attitude when he's playing football, when he's the quarterback. So it just fits right along with the guys that Hugh Freeze has had success with.
Yeah, and I'm not sure we've seen the version of Peyton Thorne we're about to see. I mean, we didn't see it at Michigan State. It's a different offense. He ran some of this in high school, but I mean, I don't know exactly what he's capable of at Auburn. I think if you can make quick decisions, that's number one. If you can make quick decisions and make correct quick decisions, obviously, don't make the wrong quick decision. But if you can make quick decisions and they're correct, that's going to go a long way in this offense. You don't have to be the most talented quarterback ever. You just got to be able to make the reads, make the good quick decision, have a little bit of mobility, and then see where that takes you. Then it's up to the receivers to do their part, offensive line to do their part. And I think now sort of the attention turns towards receiver. Like, okay, we've named a starter. We kind of figured it was going to be Thorne. It's Thorne. What in the world is happening at receiver? Because Freeze kind of still says sort of everybody's in the mix. There's Jay Fair is probably the best bet to start, but past that, it's pretty wide open. Saw Shane Hooks running with the one some on Thursday. Amari Kelly had DJ James beat, just got balls overthrown a little bit by Payton Thorne on a sideline route one time. So I think
you wouldn't put Nick
now,
Mardner in that, Hoke?
Yeah. He was out there with the ones, and Hugh mentioned him. He mentioned Jay. He mentioned Amari. He mentioned Nick Warner. He mentioned Shane. He mentioned Shorter. He mentioned Caleb Burton. And then, of course, he talked about the other guys being injured. So it's kind of the regular set of guys. It's just until you get in a game and you see who makes the plays under the lights. Because, look, like Hugh Freeze said, they've had good weeks of practice, but they haven't had a good scrimmage yet. Under the lights, stadium, scrimmage, go perform. They got to do that Saturday. And so I don't know. I'm curious to see maybe how Peyton Thorne does on Saturday. One, how's the scrimmage structured? But is Peyton Thorne, is he allowed to? Does he feel like he's the guy? Does he go out and get most of the first team reps? Does he go out there and lead? Does he sort of start to take over the mantle of QB1? And does it start on Saturday and try to elevate these receivers and get them going on this last scrimmage before in-season stuff starts? I think it's a big day for Peyton Thorne to go out there and take this thing in all the ways, in all the leadership ways. Go out and take this thing and run with it.
Yeah, that to me, you go back to that comment that Freeze made that day on Saturday, and it's like I thought I had it figured out, and then I didn't. Well, I posted this on the board too. You know, I've heard that there were some things that Peyton Thorne might have been even a little bit more advanced in at this point than maybe some of the receivers, or making throws ahead of where they are, maybe like before they can figure out how to run these option routes that Camden Brown told us in the roundtables. They're doing a lot of option routes and things of that nature. So that means everybody has to be on the same page. If he's ahead of them already, I think that's a great sign. And so it's not going to look good when his drives don't finish because of these reasons. But in the long run, when receivers start catching on to this stuff, then you go, okay, well, it's probably just going to be smoother altogether if he's running quarterback with them.
Yeah, then I guess you got to ask, like, how long of a leash do you give all these receivers until you kind of start separating those if they're not grasping these option routes and being where they're supposed to be? Now that the quarterback's there, you don't have to worry about the timing with different guys as much. Yeah, I kind of think we're going to see this wide receiver room tighten up over the next 5 or 6 practices.
Definitely. Well, that's the other thing is when you're trying to evaluate these first few games, and when you're trying to evaluate Peyton Thorne, these receivers are a big part of that. I mean, I think it could look a little messy at times in these first few games where maybe the fan in the stands is like, maybe it looks like it's Peyton Thorne's fault, but it's not really. I think you could see some of that in these first 3 games where I can already see it happening where there's some miscommunication. There's some air, and it looks on the hoof like it's Peyton Thorne, and we start getting posts on the message board about, boy, I don't know about Peyton Thorne. And the reality is maybe it's the receivers on the option route stuff. And so that'll be an interesting balance for them to evaluate Thorne correctly through this first 3 games and also evaluate the receivers. Because I think it's going to be, like I said, I think it's going to be 5 games in before you start to have an idea of exactly what this team can do, what Peyton Thorne can do, what these receivers can do, and all that good stuff. Any other thoughts?
I mean, I think there's somewhat of a timetable. I know you just said 5 games, but if you don't figure it out by A&M, I think that could be bad. I think there's a little bit more urgency than what you're hinting at, Hoke. I think if I think whatever we see Auburn and this coaching staff roll out against Texas A&M, it's going to be all the information that they've picked up since they've been here put into that game plan. I think you could be conservative to some extent against Cal. Obviously, against UMass and Samford, you can kind of, you should be able to do whatever you want. We'll see. But whatever you put out against Texas A&M is going to be what they think is the best for this football team. And that comes to, everybody getting the exact amount of snaps that they're expecting that game plan, just because that I've made the case multiple times this offseason that in College Station is Auburn's most important game on the schedule. I just think it's huge. I think it sets the tone for how the rest of the season is going to go. And so, whatever your market share at wide receiver when it comes to snaps and targets, like you need to figure it out by then or it's too late. Same with quarterback, how much you're going to use Robbie in a package with your running back rotation as well. Like you got to have all that figured out by A&M or I think it's too late.
Yeah, I guess what I meant is I don't think they're – so you're saying they need to have it figured out going into or coming out of College Station?
Like you need to win that game. I think if you want to go 8-4, you got to win an A&M.
That one or Arkansas for sure. You have to win one of those for sure to get to 8. I just don't think they're going to – I don't think they're going to – I just don't see how. I mean, you're going to play UMass, who they're going to out-athlete. They're going to play Samford. You got the road game at Cal. I'm not sure that's enough competition to go into A&M knowing, okay, we've played these 3 games. We know what we've got. I think it's going to take coming out of the A&M game to go, okay, now we've got a much clearer picture. And then I think the Georgia game will kind of stamp it because that's maybe the best. That's the best team in the country. Like that will stamp it. What I think you're going to learn a ton at A&M, and then you'll make a big jump. I think you'll come home and make a big jump to Georgia, and that'll sort of I think seal the deal on kind of what you think this team is. But I think it's going to be coming out of A&M. I just don't think they're going to be able to go into that game against Samford, UMass, and Cal and be like, all right, I know what we've got, just because I don't think the talent level is there on those two. I think they got to play A&M and then come out of that game and go, all right, we've played an SEC team and a pretty talented SEC team. Now we know who's a baller and who's not a baller.
It's just a tough situation. I mean, it's great that you got that more information, but starting out 0-2 in SEC play is going to be like, that's tough. That's a tough situation.
And who's after Georgia?
Is that LSU? Yeah. And so you're going to go 0-3 to start SEC. I don't think Auburn wins against Georgia or LSU. I think A&M. That's why I think A&M is such a huge deal. At A&M and at Arkansas, I think are the 2 ones where you've really got to win, and then you got to beat Ole Miss at home. Those are the 3 biggest games on Auburn's schedule this year. And it's just the timing of where A&M is, week 4 after, you play 2 cupcakes and you go to Cal, like that's tough. I mean, but you got to figure it out. I think you got to do whatever it takes to figure that out going into A&M. Yeah,
I think by that game, Zach, and I think by that game you will have some things figured out there with the receivers too. And you mentioned that you thought the quarterback situation would be named later. I thought so too, but I'm glad it got named now. I think it's good for the offense. I think it's good for the team moving forward.
Yeah.
I think a lot will be learned in the Cal game. I have this sneaky suspicion in a bad way that one could be somewhat of a dogfight. Just because of the situation and what it is and where you're at. And, we don't know anything about the team right now. Let's be honest. We don't know much. Okay. We got to see them. So I'm with you. I think that Texas A&M game is a tone setter, like you said, especially when you said afterwards, Georgia and LSU, I go, woo, that's tough.
It's hard.
So either way you spin it, it's tough. I think they have a chance with Texas A&M personally. I really do.
Me too.
Yeah, they'll have a shot. It's just that's going to be a tough one for a road game.
Yeah,
it's going to be a tough one. But that I think those first 3 conference games, I think Auburn fans sort of need to prepare in a way. Like, and I mean, there's a very real possibility they start 0-3 in the SEC and they're sitting there at 3-3. That absolutely could happen. And if that does happen, I don't think that should mean anything grand about what potentially could happen in the season. I think that's just a tough first 3 games, period. And they could be 0-3 and then come back and beat Ole Miss, beat State, go on the road, beat Arkansas, beat Vanderbilt, and like they could turn and do that. And by the time they play Alabama, it could be a different team than what what showed up in College Station. That's just, I think Auburn fans need to prepare themselves that could happen and not to freak out, because that's a really hard first 3 games. It kind of depends on how those games go, right, and how it happens, and and things like that. But it's certainly possible, and I think it's a great opportunity for Hugh Freeze and his team. Man, you got 3 games to get ready, and then you get thrown into the mix against Georgia, LSU, maybe the best 2 teams in the league, and A&M, who's loaded with talent. That's your first 3. You're going to know after those first 3 games who's bought in. You're going to know real quick. You're going to know that, I mean, it'll take those 3, and if you're 0-3, you're going to know real quick who's bought into this thing and this culture, and who's not. You're going to be tested early. So
sure.
All right, let's get out of here real quick. Anybody think Peyton Thorne doesn't start every game? Take injuries out of it, but assuming injuries aren't a part of the equation, does anybody think Peyton Thorne doesn't start every football game?
No, I think he does. I think he starts everyone if no injuries.
And I think his leash is longer than some people are acting like it is.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I agree with that too.
Yeah, Justin,
agree with that.
Justin opened up with that, Zach. He said that he had the same sentiment that.
Oh yeah.
Even though Robbie Ashford, he still left the door open for him. I think I'm with y'all too. I think that the leash is pretty long for Thorne.
Yeah. Well, Peyton Thorne's the guy, and if he does everything he's supposed to do, he could be the guy for 2 years. He'll have a decision to make, but what a way to start off Hugh Freeze's tenure if he could find a reliable, good quarterback right out the gate for his first 2 years at Auburn. It would be a really, really good situation, and then you start bringing in talent behind him. That's kind of the perfect deal. Peyton plays 2, bring in Walker White, bring in somebody else, and then you can get this thing kind of going in terms of rotating guys behind Peyton right off the bat. Obviously, that's a ways away in terms of what Peyton does this year and all those good things. All right, appreciate everybody for joining us. Quick shout out, Session Cocktail, downtown Auburn, next to Taco Mama on Magnolia. Go check them out. They have some awesome cocktails, great old fashioned, happy hour 4 to 6. So go check them out. It's a really, really cool place with some booth seating and some bar seating and some couch seating. There's no stand up. It's not a college bar, all that good stuff. So go check out Session Cocktail in downtown Auburn. For Zach Cole, until next time, we'll see you guys.